September 16, 2018, 9:17 p.m. 26-year-old Emily Carter smiles at the cashier, her fingers brushing a receipt as she turns toward the exit, unaware that this is the last moment she will ever be seen alive on camera. The store's surveillance captures everything in quiet clarity. The automatic doors slide open. Emily steps out into the dim glow of the parking lot lights. She pauses for half a second, as if listening, then continues forward. Nothing about her movement suggests fear. Nothing suggests urgency. To anyone reviewing that footage later, it looks ordinary, routine, safe. And that is exactly why investigators got it wrong. Because while everyone focused on Emily's final smile inside the store, they overlooked what happened just seconds later outside. A different camera, a wider angle, a detail so subtle it blended into the background. At first glance, it meant nothing. But hidden in that parking lot footage was a single moment, one that would quietly contradict the entire timeline police believed was true. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because the camera didn't just capture Emily leaving. It captured who was already waiting. September 16, 2018, 9:17 p.m. 26-year-old Emily Carter smiles at the cashier, her fingers brushing a receipt as she turns toward the exit, unaware that this is the last moment she will ever be seen alive on camera. The store's surveillance captures everything in quiet clarity. The automatic doors slide open. Emily steps out into the dim glow of the parking lot lights. She pauses for half a second, as if listening, then continues forward. Nothing about her movement suggests fear. Nothing suggests urgency. To anyone reviewing that footage later, it looks ordinary, routine, safe. And that is exactly why investigators got it wrong. Because while everyone focused on Emily's final smile inside the store, they overlooked what happened just seconds later outside. A different camera, a wider angle, a detail so subtle it blended into the background. At first glance, it meant nothing. But hidden in that parking lot footage was a single moment, one that would quietly contradict the entire timeline police believed was true. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because the camera didn't just capture Emily leaving. It captured who was already waiting. Emily Carter was not the kind of person people worried about. Friends described her as deliberate, almost methodical in the way she moved through life. She planned her days, answered messages quickly, and avoided unnecessary risks. She lived alone in a second-floor apartment in Cedar Grove, Ohio, a quiet suburb where most people still waved to their neighbors and left their porch lights on at night. She worked as a dental assistant at a small family practice just 10 minutes from her apartment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, predictable, the kind of job that fit her personality perfectly. Every weekday morning, she left at exactly 7:40 a.m. Every evening, she returned home before dark, unless she had already told someone otherwise. And that part matters, because Emily never disappeared without telling someone where she was going. Her younger sister, Lauren, would later tell investigators that Emily had a habit of sharing even the smallest updates. If she stopped for groceries, she would text. If she planned to meet a friend, she would mention it hours in advance. It wasn't paranoia. It was just who she was. Organized, transparent, accountable, which is why the night of September 16th stood out immediately. That Sunday had been uneventful. Emily spent most of the afternoon at home, catching up on laundry and preparing meals for the week. Around 6:30 p.m., she called Lauren. They spoke for 12 minutes. Nothing unusual. They talked about work, about an upcoming birthday dinner, about a new show Emily had started watching. There was no tension in her voice, no distraction, no hint that anything was wrong. At 8:52 p.m., Emily sent her final known text message. It was to a coworker, confirming her shift for the next morning. Simple, routine, exactly what you would expect from her. Then, at 9:05 p.m., she left her apartment. Security footage from her building shows her walking down the exterior stairwell, keys in hand, locking the door behind her. She's wearing jeans, a light gray sweater, and white sneakers. Her hair is pulled back in a loose ponytail. There's no bag, no sign she plans to be gone long. She gets into her car and drives away. That short trip would become one of the most analyzed routes in the entire investigation. A straight 6-minute drive to a local convenience store just off Route 18, a place she had been dozens of times before. There were no detours, no unexpected stops. Traffic cameras confirm her vehicle moving exactly as expected, arriving at the store parking lot at 9:14 p.m. 3 minutes later, she is inside. The store itself is small. 2 aisles, a beverage cooler, a single checkout counter. The kind of place where the cashier often recognizes regular customers. That night was no different. The cashier would later tell police that Emily seemed completely normal, calm, polite. She picked up a bottle of iced tea and a small pack of gum. Nothing else. No signs of distress. No indication she felt unsafe. At 9:17 p.m., she steps up to the counter. And this is the moment everyone focused on. Because she smiles. It's brief, but it's unmistakable. A relaxed, genuine expression as she thanks the cashier and accepts her receipt. For investigators, that smile became a reference point. Proof that, seconds before she disappeared, Emily Carter was not under duress. But this is where everything starts to shift. Because while that moment felt reassuring, it also created a blind spot. Investigators built their early timeline around the assumption that whatever happened to Emily occurred after she left the store, after she stepped outside, after she entered the parking lot. It seemed logical. There were no signs of struggle inside, no suspicious individuals captured near her at the counter, no indication that anyone was following her through the aisles. So attention moved outward. But what they didn't fully account for was how much could already be in motion before she ever reached that door. At 9:18 p.m., the automatic doors open again. Emily walks out of frame, and for a brief moment, the case appears to lose her entirely. That gap, those few seconds between interior and exterior cameras, would quietly become one of the most critical windows in the entire investigation, because nothing about Emily's life suggested she would vanish voluntarily. She had work in the morning, plans for the week, a routine she rarely broke. And yet, from this point forward, every answer would depend on something no one initially questioned. Not the smile, not the store, but what was already waiting outside. At 9:18 p.m., Emily Carter steps out of the convenience store and disappears from the interior camera's view. The automatic doors slide shut behind her, and for a brief moment, there is nothing. No sound, no movement, just a gap between angles. Then the parking lot camera picks her up. The footage is grainier, wider. The lighting is uneven, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Emily appears at the top of the frame, walking at a steady pace toward the row where her car is parked. Her posture is relaxed. Her arms hang naturally at her sides, one hand holding the small plastic bag. She doesn't look over her shoulder. She doesn't hesitate. At 9:18 and 7 seconds p.m., she passes beneath a flickering light pole. The camera captures her face for just a second longer before she moves into a darker section of the lot. And this is where investigators believed the timeline became simple. They assumed that whatever happened next happened quickly, because at 9:18 and 12 seconds p.m., Emily is no longer visible. She should have reached her car within seconds. It was parked just outside the camera's clearest range, partially obscured by a larger vehicle. When officers later arrived, they found her car still there, locked, undisturbed. Her phone, her wallet, her keys gone with her. It didn't make sense. If she had made it to the car, there should have been some sign. A door opening, interior lights flickering on, movement captured in reflection. But none of that appeared in the footage. Instead, she simply vanished. At 9:19 p.m., less than a minute later, another customer exits the store. He walks across the same section of pavement, heading toward a truck parked nearby. He doesn't react to anything unusual. No hesitation, no glance toward the area where Emily disappeared. For investigators, that detail mattered, because it suggested there was no obvious disturbance, no visible struggle, nothing that would draw attention in an otherwise quiet parking lot. By 9:30 p.m., Emily's absence had not yet raised alarm. It wasn't until the following morning, when she failed to show up for work, that concern began to build. At 10:12 a.m., her employer calls her phone. No answer. At 11:03 a.m., Lauren tries again. Still nothing. By early afternoon, her family contacts local police. Officers arrive at the convenience store just after 2 p.m. The parking lot looks exactly as it had the night before. Emily's car is still there, parked in the same position. No broken windows. No signs of forced entry. No visible damage. Inside the vehicle, everything appears normal. Too normal. There are no personal belongings left behind that would suggest she intended to leave it. No purse. No phone. No indication she stepped away voluntarily. And that's when the case shifts from concern to urgency. Detectives begin reviewing the surveillance footage almost immediately. They start with the interior camera, watching Emily's final moments at the counter again and again. Each time, the same conclusion. She looks safe. She looks unaware. She looks like someone who expects to walk out of that store and drive home. But she never does. So attention turns to the parking lot. Frame by frame, investigators track her movement. They mark timestamps, measure distances, calculate how long it should have taken her to reach her car. And then they focus on the moment she disappears. 9:18 and 12 seconds p.m. That becomes the anchor point. From there, they begin building a theory. The leading assumption is abduction. It fits the absence of evidence. No struggle visible on camera could mean it happened just outside the frame. Quick, controlled, possibly by someone who had done this before. Within 48 hours, police release a statement confirming that Emily Carter is considered missing under suspicious circumstances. Tips begin to come in. Most lead nowhere, but one draws immediate attention. A witness reports seeing a dark-colored sedan idling near the edge of the parking lot around the time Emily disappeared. The description is vague, but it's enough to give investigators direction. They return to the footage, this time looking for vehicles. At first, nothing stands out. Cars come and go. Headlights pass through the frame. But then, near the far corner of the lot, partially obscured by shadow, they notice it. A vehicle that appears to remain stationary longer than the others. It's difficult to make out details. The angle is poor, the lighting inconsistent, but the timing aligns closely with Emily's exit. And just like that, the investigation narrows. Over the next several days, police canvass the area, searching for anyone who might recognize the vehicle. They pull additional footage from nearby businesses, piece together fragments of movement from surrounding streets. Eventually, they identify a car that matches the general description. It belongs to a man named Daniel Reeves, 32 years old, local resident. Prior record for minor offenses, nothing violent, but enough to raise concern. When questioned, Daniel claims he was in the area that night, but insists he never saw Emily. He says he stopped briefly to check his phone, then left. There is no direct evidence placing him in contact with her. No DNA, no eyewitness account, no clear footage showing interaction. But the circumstantial timeline is enough. And this is where everything begins to go wrong. Because investigators, under pressure to find answers, begin to build their case around Daniel. They interpret the parked car as intent. They interpret the timing as opportunity. And they interpret the lack of alternative leads as confirmation. Within 2 weeks, Daniel Reeves is arrested. The community reacts quickly. Fear turns to relief. The narrative feels complete. A man in a parked car. A woman alone in a dimly lit lot. A disappearance that seemed sudden, but now appears explained. Except it isn't. Because even as the case moves forward, there are inconsistencies. Small ones at first. Details that don't quite align with the original timeline. For example, the exact position of Emily's car suggests she would have approached from a slightly different angle than initially assumed. An angle that may not have been fully visible in the camera's field of view. But that possibility is dismissed. Then there's the timing. The gap between her last visible step and complete disappearance is shorter than expected. Almost too short for the scenario investigators proposed. But again, it's overlooked, because by that point, the focus has shifted from questioning what happened to proving that they already knew. Daniel maintains his innocence. Throughout interrogation, throughout the early hearings, he repeats the same statement. He was there, but he did not take Emily Carter. And for a long time, no one believes him, because everyone is still watching the same footage, the same angle, the same few seconds where Emily walks out of view. What they don't realize is that the answer was never in the moment she disappeared. It was in the seconds before, in a part of the frame no one thought to question. And that single oversight would keep the truth hidden for years. For nearly 3 years, the case of Emily Carter remained frozen in place. Daniel Reeves sat in a county jail awaiting trial, his life effectively over in the eyes of the public. Prosecutors continued to build their case around timing, proximity, and probability. To them, the sequence was clear. Emily exits the store. Daniel is already in the lot. She disappears. He leaves shortly after. It was enough to sound convincing, but it was never enough to be complete. And in 2021, someone finally noticed. Her name was Rachel Kim, a digital forensic analyst, working with a private investigative review group that specialized in unresolved cases. She wasn't part of the original investigation. She had no connection to Cedar Grove, no personal ties to Emily or her family. What she had was distance. And sometimes, distance is the only way to see what's been missed. Rachel wasn't looking for a suspect. She wasn't trying to prove anyone's guilt or innocence. Her job was simpler than that. Review the evidence, reconstruct the timeline, identify inconsistencies. At first, the footage felt familiar. The same interior angle, the same smile, the same assumption that nothing was wrong. Then the parking lot. She watched it once, then again, then frame by frame, not focusing on Emily, focusing on everything else. Because this is where everything changes. At 9:17 and 54 seconds p.m., 23 seconds before Emily exits the store, the parking lot camera captures something subtle. A vehicle passes slowly through the far edge of the frame. It doesn't stop. It doesn't draw attention. And that's exactly why no one noticed it. But Rachel does. She rewinds, plays it again. This time, she tracks its movement more carefully. The car enters from the right side, moving at a reduced speed, almost as if searching. Its headlights briefly sweep across the parked vehicles, illuminating sections of the lot that remain otherwise dark. Then, just before exiting the frame, it turns its lights off. Not completely, but enough to dim its visibility. And that detail doesn't make sense, because drivers don't turn off their lights while still moving through a parking lot, unless they don't want to be seen. Rachel isolates the timestamp, 9:17 and 54 seconds p.m. Then she skips forward, 9:18 and 3 seconds p.m. Emily appears on the exterior camera, 9:18 and 7 seconds p.m. She passes beneath the light, 9:18 and 12 seconds p.m. She disappears. Now Rachel overlays the movements, and what she sees rewrites everything. Because the vehicle that dimmed its lights doesn't leave the area. It loops, not fully visible, not directly captured, but its presence is implied through shifting shadows and faint reflections on the sides of other cars. It's still there, waiting, and no one saw it, because everyone was watching Emily. This single detail changes the entire timeline, because it proves that someone else was already in motion before she even stepped outside. Daniel Reeves' car, the one investigators focused on, is parked on the opposite side of the lot. Static, unmoving. It never aligns with the angle where Emily disappears. But this second vehicle does. Rachel digs deeper. She enhances the footage, adjusts contrast, tracks light patterns across multiple frames. And then, finally, she catches it. At 9:18 and 10 seconds p.m., just 2 seconds before Emily vanishes, a faint reflection appears on the side of a nearby SUV. Not Emily, not a pedestrian, but the outline of a vehicle pulling in close. Too close. The angle is wrong for Daniel's car, but perfect for the unidentified one. And suddenly, The disappearance is no longer a mystery of absence. It becomes a moment of precision, a calculated approach, timed down to seconds, executed just outside the camera's clearest view, and missed entirely because no one thought to look at what happened before she walked out. Rachel presents her findings to the authorities. At first, there is resistance. The case was already built, the suspect already charged, years of work already invested, but the evidence is undeniable. Prosecutors quietly reevaluate. The charges against Daniel Reeves are dropped within months. After nearly 3 years behind bars, he walks free. But Emily Carter is still missing. And now, the investigation has to start over, this time with a different question. Not who was closest, but who was prepared. Using the newly identified vehicle behavior, investigators expand their search. They revisit traffic cameras, pull archived footage from surrounding streets, reconstruct possible entry and exit routes from the parking lot. It takes time, but eventually a pattern emerges. A similar vehicle appears on 2 separate cameras within a 5-mile radius, both within minutes of Emily's disappearance. Same movement, same dimmed headlights, same deliberate pacing. The license plate is partially obscured, but not completely. With enhancement and cross-referencing, analysts narrow it down. The vehicle is registered to a man named Victor Hale, 38 years old, no significant criminal record, works as an independent contractor, often traveling between towns at irregular hours. At first glance, nothing stands out. But when investigators dig deeper, they find something unsettling. Victor had been in Cedar Grove multiple times over the previous months. Not for work, just passing through. Always late at night. Always near areas with limited surveillance coverage. And then they find the final piece. A toll booth record placing his vehicle on a highway just 30 minutes after Emily disappeared, leaving town quickly. When questioned, Victor initially denies being in the area that night. But confronted with the footage, the timestamps, the reconstructed route, his story begins to break. He admits to being in the parking lot, but claims he never interacted with Emily, that he saw nothing, that he left immediately. But the evidence says otherwise. The positioning, the timing, the reflection, all of it points to a single conclusion. He was there before she walked out, and he moved the moment she did. In 2023, nearly 5 years after Emily Carter's disappearance, Victor Hale is arrested and charged. The case that once seemed straightforward becomes something else entirely. A lesson in how easily the truth can be obscured, not by complexity, but by assumption. Because the most important detail was never hidden. It was visible the entire time, just not where anyone thought to look. Emily's final smile was real, but it was never the full story. The real story was already unfolding outside, in the corner of a frame, in the seconds before anyone was paying attention, and in a parking lot camera that didn't just capture her last steps. It captured the moment everything was set in motion. If there's anything this case leaves behind, it's this. Sometimes the answer isn't in what disappears. It's in what was already there, waiting.